So yesterday, the news dropped that Attorney General Pam Bondi, FBI Director Kash Patel, and the Deputy Director of the FBI, Dan Bongino, that they suddenly, mysteriously, and miraculously didn't have a client list for Jeffrey Epstein, despite all evidence suggesting otherwise. And then in the ensuing MAGA land insanity that happened, and trust me, I don't have a problem with them eating their own. But while that was happening, right, the Trump administration wanted to distract you from that reality. And so what did they do? They went to LA, and in a show of force and nothing more than a pressure tactic of intimidation and to create and sow fear, they, as in the Trump administration, decided to bring in armed federal agents and armed National Guardsmen, about 80 of them, to a park that is known to be locally visited and inhabited by immigrants. Why? Because why the hell not? Because this is totally on brand for this administration. And the reason why I'm continuing to talk about it is I want to keep it in the public discourse. We cannot allow ourselves to be normalized by this kind of shit. And the reason why is if we allow ourselves to be normalized by the kind of stuff that we saw happen yesterday in LA, then we are simply frogs in the boiling point of water, where as each and every moment the temperature rises, we sit there and we see it happening. And yeah, a lot of us are outraged, and yet it gets to the point where, you know what, we're dead. So I want to talk about what happened. Maybe you know about it, maybe you don't, but I want to make sure that we keep it in the discourse, in the conversation, because we cannot stand for these types of acts and shows of force to be perpetrated upon and imposed upon the people of America. So yesterday in LA, there's a park called MacArthur Park. And I want to give you a description of MacArthur Park because it'll completely explain why the Trump administration chose this park to be able to do its show of force. So MacArthur Park is located in an area of LA where, and this is according to the Associated Press, this is their description, quote, where immigrant families line up to play soccer in the evenings and on the weekends. There's an amphitheater that hosts summer concerts and sports fields. A thoroughfare on the east side is often crammed with food stands selling tacos and other delicacies, along with vendors speaking multiple languages and hawking t-shirts, toys, knickknacks, and household items, period. Does that give you a pretty good kind of, vision about this park in LA? Well, let me tell you another description that was provided in the AP that'll also give you the reason why ICE and federal agents and the National Guard showed up there yesterday. Quote, the operation occurred at a park in a neighborhood with large Mexican, Central American, and other immigrant populations, and is lined by businesses with signs in Spanish and other languages that has been dubbed by local officials as the, quote, Ellis Island of the West Coast. How appropriate, then, that the Trump administration picked the Ellis Island of the West Coast to do this show of force. And let me be clear, it was just propaganda for the Trump administration. By all accounts, no one was arrested and detained, probably in large part because locals tipped off people that were in the park that this raid was going to happen. And so I am glad to hear that that was the case. But we have to actually get into the details of what this show of force was so you can understand how absolutely out of control and out of bounds it was, because it was completely unnecessary. So the images are pretty graphic, and you can see them right now on your screen. You've got armed federal agents and armed troops that are making their way in Humvees, armored vehicles, horseback, making their way through this park. They were on foot. They were on horseback. They were in military vehicles. They spent a whopping maybe hour, according to news and media reports, before they abruptly left. Now, that probably was in large part to LA Mayor Karen Bass getting involved, and we're going to get into that in a second. But the Department of Homeland Security wouldn't even say if anyone had been arrested during that operation at MacArthur Park. Wouldn't you actually tout the arrest as being evidence of something that supports that show of force? Of course, because there was no real point to it. It really wasn't an operation to be able to go and detain people. It was just to go to scare the shit out of the people in LA. Why? Because LA is a sanctuary city. It is no secret that Trump wants to target Governor Newsom and LA Mayor Karen Bass. He wants to go after blue states like California so he can use them as examples to be able to quell, arrest, protest, and disorder, as he would call it, in other places. There were children in a summer camp that were in that park when these armed forces came sweeping through. Now, in addition, there were community outreach workers that were present that were helping the homeless and other people that were in the park on Monday afternoon, and they had guns pointed at them by these federal agents when they were in MacArthur Park. It's disgusting when you see this, and according to the AP, there were 17 Humvees, 4 tactical vehicles, 2 ambulances, and the armed soldiers. And by the way, when you look at these images, this looks like, I said this morning on YouTube, this looks like Fallujah. I mean, this looks like you're in Iraq. I mean, this doesn't look like downtown LA. And a park, no less, right? This is not even like the streets. This is inside of a park where kids are playing, a park where there are immigrants. So 17 Humvees, 4 tactical vehicles, 2 ambulances, and the armed soldiers. And you know what else was there? A camera crew. So federal agents roll up with their own camera crew. Why? To film video. According to one LA, I want to say it was a council person, they were like, it looked like it was a TikTok video being filmed. Who knew that we had influencers at ICE and influencers at DHS? But I guess in their efforts to be able to do their propaganda video, they wanted to make sure that they did this. And you wait, you'll see this being released on an official account for DHS or ICE or the Trump administration. It'll roll out. Trust me, we're going to see it. 2 defense officials anonymously telling the AP that what happened at MacArthur Park yesterday was, quote, not a military operation, but they acknowledged that the size and the scope of the Guard's participation, as in the National Guard, could make it look like one to the public. Quote, it's just going to be more overt and larger than we usually participate in. And it was a LA City Council president who said that this morning it looked like the staging for a TikTok video, and that was Marquise Harris Dawson. You know, when we see stuff like this happen, of course, we know that it's only in the efforts to want to scare people into submission, because that's really the only way that Trump can get away with what he's trying to do, especially in the immigration context. Their policies are flawed and illegal and unconstitutional. The only way for them to be able to advance the ball is what? To violate court orders, disobey court orders, non-compliance with court orders. They have to do things in the dead of night. They have to kidnap people and deport them and detain them and get rid of them in the dead of night, because sunlight being the best disinfectant, if they were doing it, we would all know that what they're doing is wrong. And we do know that what they're doing is wrong, which is why it's so important, again, for us to continue to talk about it so that it is not forgotten. The armed agents that showed up yesterday at this park wore fatigues, masks, and helmets, as we have seen in the video, as we have seen in the media reports and in the photographs. They marched in lines. Some, again, were on horseback. Did they expect people to flee and run and they were just going to go trample them with the horses? How very Civil War era of you. These dozens of armed federal agents marched over soccer fields and the grass. Military-style vehicles blocked the streets and a federal helicopter was swooping overhead. LA Mayor Karen Bass said the following: what I saw in the park today looked like a city under siege, under armed occupation. It's the way a city looks before a coup. Now let's talk about the federal presence in LA, because remember, the last protest or demonstration over these immigration raids was about 3 weeks ago, if you will recall. And back then, on June 7th, Trump brought in the National Guard. So he mobilized 4,000 National Guard members, and he sent 700 Marines to that area of California in LA. But even though that they need firefighters right now for wildfires in California, in LA, the president has actually, through SecDef, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, has only released 150 National Guard troops to help fight the fires. And that's according to Gregory Bovino, a Customs and Border Protection chief in Southern California. But listen to what Bovino said. Name him and shame him, people. His name is Gregory Bovino, Bovino. He said this, quote, "Better get used to us now, because this is going to be normal very soon. We will go anywhere, anytime we want in Los Angeles." You know, Bovino has to resort to threats, right? I mean, he's severely underestimating the residents of LA. What you see here in the footage right now that you're watching, you see patriots in the forms of civilians that are holding their cell phones up and they're recording what is happening in real time. You're also getting the benefit of footage from local news. We have to value local news and local journalism. They're the ones that are providing us with a bird's eye view, literally in this case, from their news helicopter. But they're on the ground and they're providing the firsthand accounts of what is happening at the hands of the Trump administration as he is imposing his immigration and enforcement policies on Americans. They're providing us a valuable service, but those civilians are also doing so because they're doing it at their own risk of their own safety, right? They are there to be able to document this, not only for us to be able to see what is going on, but also for purposes of history. Because history will not look kindly on this administration for what it is doing, especially that show of force that we saw yesterday. Once the mayor showed up, she got on the phone with somebody who was supposed to be in charge of the operation at MacArthur Park, and they immediately got the person out. Bovino then said on X, he posted this, he said, "We may well go back to MacArthur Park or other places in and around Los Angeles. Illegal aliens have the opportunity to self-deport. Now we'll help things along a bit." You know, such bravado, such big talk from somebody, such a keyboard warrior to be able to do that. But this is the only way that they are able to successfully do something. It's to be able to cow people into submission, to quell protest and to quell dissent by scaring people. And listen, I'll speak frankly, right? It is working to a large extent, right? Fernando Rodriguez, who runs a small convenience store on South Alvarado Street near the park, said that it looked like they were going to go to war when these 15 armored vehicles pulled up yesterday. He said everyone in the community is afraid of being picked up by immigration agents, including those who have legal status. Why? Because they are going after people who are citizens who have legal status. They are just racially profiling. You're just getting picked up if you're walking down the street. You're also getting picked up if you're working because, you know, that's exactly what the Trump administration thinks, right? That all these horrible, violent criminals are all paying taxes and working and going to churches and going to court and being a part of the legal process because that's exactly what they think is happening. Fernando said, agents do not care whether people have immigration papers if they are Latino. Amen, Fernando. Walking while brown, driving while brown, working while brown. If you look Hispanic, if you look Latino, it doesn't make a difference if you're legal, doesn't make a difference. They're just going to take you and round you up anyway. To hell with process, to hell with the Constitution. We'll figure that out later. Fernando says that business at his store has been slow for about a month since the enforcement raids were intensified within his community. He also worries about his 2 children, ages 6 and 7, who are with him at his shop during the time of this kind of show of force at the park yesterday. Karen Bass also said the following. She says, "You can spin it any way you like, but in my opinion, it's a political agenda of provoking fear and terror," which is true. And there are a couple of lawsuits that have resulted from what has happened in LA from the immigration enforcement. 5 individuals and 3 groups have sued the Department of Homeland Security in federal court, alleging that the department illegally arrested and detained people to meet arbitrary arrest quotas, that the raids targeted people based on their skin color and occupation, and they allege that the arrested individuals are kept in dungeon-like facilities, often for days. Makes sense. Sounds consistent. Sounds a little CCOT. Sounds a little alligator Alcatraz as well. There was also a U.S. citizen who I covered here on the Katie Phang News Channel. He was arrested and detained while he was trying to record ICE raids while they were happening, and he has sued the federal government seeking more than $1 million in damages. Again, the patriots yesterday are the ones that are standing at great risk to themselves with their cell phones, videoing all of these people who, by the way, again, are masked, and they're not showing their IDs, and they're not readily showing their faces because Yeah, they would be subjected to public scorn if we knew who they were. Why? Because I don't want to hear the excuse that they're just, quote, doing their job, because that's what the Nazis said. I had the privilege of spending time with Jolly Good Ginger this morning on YouTube, and he, with his military experience, shared the following phrase: cordon and search, CORDON, cordon and search. And he said, what we saw in LA yesterday is that military concept of cordon and search. It's the idea of this show of force going into an area, and I'm not going to get it perfect, so forgive me, those of you that have the military experience. But I wanted to share this with all of you because it made sense. You have this military presence that is a show of force, and it goes into an area, and it has a legitimate purpose sometimes, right? To be able to go and search for insurgents, to be able to search for weapons, to be search for rebels, to be searching for the enemies. But you're doing it in an area that's an occupied area because you want people to see. You want the people in the village and the cities and the towns and the areas where you're doing a cordon and search. You want them to see you. You want them to know that your presence is there. And that is exactly what happened yesterday in LA. They wanted the big pomp and circumstance of the armored vehicles and the Humvees and the helicopter and the cameras. They wanted the show of the weapons and the armor and the mass, right? That's what they wanted. They wanted to scare everybody into thinking that this could happen. And listen, it could happen anywhere at any time. But of course, they're picking the sanctuary city of LA to be able to do this. It's Trump's attempt at shock and awe. But we know that he does everything poorly. And we know that he does everything without true kind of thought when it goes into the process. So the shock and awe, it has the intent of scaring people, and yet guaranteed on July 17th, we will make good trouble on July 17th because we will be attending nonviolent, peaceful protests to the tune of millions, I am confident, just like No King's Day, to be able to show that these acts of perpetrated terror, to be able to scare people into submission, doesn't work. You know, I just wanted to kind of close briefly with this. I was saying this morning as well, an act of protest doesn't have to be on some large scale. As I've said before here and at other places, it can be an act of kindness. Your act of protest can be an act of kindness. We as Americans are now going to be living under the onus and the burden of the big bullshit bill. And even though the Republicans, gamed it so that some of the cuts may not kick in until after the midterms in 2026, we're aware of those games. We know that it happened. And that's why we're spreading the word far and wide as to how this impacts all Americans. But we have to be there for those that are affected by the big bullshit bill. We have to be there for those that are affected by this in our community. These immigration raids, these shows of force, we have to be united. We have to be united in our protest. We have to make sure that this administration knows that we're fully aware that they're incompetent and that they're cruel. And that's a dangerous formula, incompetence and cruelty. But we're better than them. We're smarter than them. We can out-strategize them. And our voices are louder collectively. So your act of protest can be an act of kindness, but be activated and be engaged. Find a way to be activated and engaged within your own community. You can find that space. You do not have an obligation to be a part of some bigger national cause. Just your movement alone within your community will echo, because collectively, all of those small movements, they become and they build something bigger and powerful. So don't underestimate yourself. The fact that nobody got arrested yesterday, pretty big tell that people are smart and people know what's happening. And I think the reason why we continue to have these conversations here and in other places and with the folks at Midas is because we want you to understand that you are equally as empowered. We're living in scary times. I won't bullshit you, but we have the means to be able to outwit them. And you know what? We're just better than them. We're better than them across the board in every single way. So don't underestimate your ability to affect a change. Be mad, be outraged, demand accountability. You know I sure as hell am. I'll see you on the other side. Katie Phang here. The truth matters now more than ever. So hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. Thanks for watching.